Okay, so this week's labs are dealing with axonometric and perspective projection. This task is dealing with the perspective side, and we're going to create a layered solution on SolidWorks. So we're going to create a SolidWorks drawing going through an example from the textbook, layer by layer, which you can then export into a PowerPoint and create a layer by layer solution for students to go through. So before we start, this is based on the question at the bottom of page 101 and then continuing on to page 102 in the DCG textbook. So if you want to follow along that way as well, it might be helpful. Before we actually start the drawing, we're going to go down here to the layers and we're going to create a few layers that we're going to use. So if that layers section there isn't coming up for you, just go down to this bottom tab, right click, go into toolbars and make sure layer is selected. When you have that up, click here, layer properties, and I'm going to create a new layer to work on. So just click new. I'm going to call this layer question. So that is just going to be like the plan view or the setup of the question is going to be on that layer. I want it to stay black, that's fine. Style is just going to be a solid line, that's fine. And I'm going to change the thickness here to 0.5 millimeters. So it'll appear fairly messy on the sheet, but then when you go out to print it as PDF or export as JPEG, you'll be fit to see the difference in the line thickness then. So I'll start with just question and click OK to that. So then down here, make sure I'm on that question layer. So everything I draw now is going to be on that layer. So I'm just going to start by drawing the plan view, which is given to us in page 101. And if you look on page 102, we're going to kind of try and create it at that angle as well. So you can follow along what I have on the screen if you want, and just get it roughly placed in the same orientation. Okay, just make sure them two lines are perpendicular and these two lines are perpendicular and the opposing edges are parallel, alright, because it mightn't snap on automatically. So I'm just drawing in all the lines first and then I'll worry about dimensioning it now after. So the overall length of that side is 30 millimeters. And then if I zoom in, so you'll have to bear with me today as I don't have a mouse, so I might be a bit slower. The dimension between each of them lines then is 6 mil. Don't worry about getting the dimension lines looking neat because we will be hiding them once we have it done. So I just want to get them dimensioned properly and then we can work from that. The overall length of the object is 26 plus 55, so it's broken up. I'll just do that. I'll go 26 for this first section and then 55 for this second section. So just take a moment yourself and make sure that you get it all dimensioned up properly. Once you have that done and you're happy enough with it, we can just highlight all them dimensions, right click and say hide, and I want to hide these two dimensions at the top as well. So I don't actually want to see the dimensions, that's just to make sure that they're the same size. Make sure you click hide and not delete, because when you delete it then, it gets rid of the information and the line could move then. Okay, now we have to draw in our spectator. So we can look at the drawing on the textbook and see roughly where it's positioned. I will give you measurements. So we're just going to click a point. We want it directly below this corner here. And there's a measurement given to us in the textbook of 52 mil. So we can go smart dimension from the point to that corner and change it to 52. Just to make sure it's directly below it, I'm going to click it, hold Control, and click that corner point, and I'm going to make a vertical relation between them. So that means it's directly below it. Hide that dimension also. And now we have the spectator. I'm going to label that. So going to Annotation, Note, and I'm just going to label that S for spectator and move it in beside it. Okay, so we now have the kind of basis of the question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that point S, so the actual point, if I can get it zoomed in beside it, and I'm going to fix that point, so I don't want that to move. What I'm also going to do is fix two of the points on the drawing. So click that bottom point and say fix. It's telling me it's over defined, so I'm actually just going to get rid of that. We'll leave it as it is, and sure, if it causes any bother, we can go back and change that. So we have a spectator and we have our object now. So if you look in the textbook, you'll see that this is kind of like the top ridge of a roof, and these two sides are angled up. I'm going to say this side here is angled at 35 degrees and this one at 20. Okay, so it doesn't give us the angles in the textbook, but I'm going to say the left one is 35 and the right is 20. And we'll need that later on. Now what we need to do is find our picture plane. And to do that, we first have to get the cone of vision and then get a perpendicular line. So I'm going to go into the layers, create a new layer. I'm going to call it cone of vision. I'm going to make it a different color, so I might do it green. Click OK. I'm going to change the thickness to 0.35. So usually construction lines, we would do them 0.35. And I'll change the style to a phantom line. It doesn't really matter what you do it, but it just makes it stand out. So it's slightly different than the solid line. I'm going to click new actually again, so I know I'm going to need my picture plane in a minute, so I'm going to create that while I'm here as well. I'm going to call that layer picture plane. I usually like to have axes and important things like that red, so I'm going to put the picture plane red, change the style, actually leave it solid, but I'm going to change the thickness to 0.5 mil because it's kind of a primary line or a very important line in the drawing, so I'll keep it thick. Click OK. Go down here now, I want to be on the cone of vision layer, so make sure cone of vision is selected. Start a sketch, start a line, and I'm going to go from the two extreme points, so the very outer point on the left and the outer point on the right. We call them the extreme points, connected to the spectator, and up to the other extreme point. Now I want to bisect this angle. The easiest way to do that on SolidWorks is to go for a center point arc. Use the spectator as my center point. Go from one of the lines over to the other, and you might have to go over and back to make sure it is drawn it in the proper direction. I have that arc now between them. If I connect a line from the spectator through the center point of that arc, it'll bisect the angle for me. Go back into the line, start the spectator, click there at the center point of the arc, and extend that line on out. So now I'm going to use that line to draw my picture plane, and I want my picture plane to be perpendicular to that there. Okay. So if I change to the picture plane layer and I draw a line, I'm going to draw it fairly random first, just so that it doesn't snap onto anything. So if you see these lines coming up, I don't want to click it where that comes up, or it'll automatically add relations that I don't want. So click it over there somewhere. Now I'm going to make it perpendicular to this line first of all. A rule of thumb now when you're on SolidWorks, so if I clicked this line first and then this line and made them perpendicular, it would try move the cone of vision to be perpendicular to this. So the one you want to stay in its original position, you click it first. So that usually works. So if I click this line first and then I click the picture plane, so that means I want this one to stay in its position and I want the picture plane to move in relation to that. Click perpendicular, you see the picture plane moved and not that other line. Now the question does say that the picture plane is resting on this corner. So I also want to click that corner because I want it to stay where it is. Hold Control and select the picture plane, and I want to make them coincident. So that is my picture plane in now, and I'm going to annotate that. I'm just going to stick a note here at the end. You can draw an arrow like that, and I'm going to call it picture plane. Okay, so the next thing I have to do now is I want to find my ground line and my horizon line, and the measurements or the height between them is given in that drawing as well. But before I do that, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to say my ground line. I'm going to change the color of the ground line to a pink, and I'm going to make it 0.5 mil. Click new. I'm going to make my horizon line. I'm going to make the horizon line blue, and I'm going to change the thickness to 0.5 mil as well. So make sure I'm on the ground line layer, start a sketch, down here, kind of as low on the page as we can get it really. I want to select my picture plane then, hold Control and select the ground line and make them parallel. So because I selected the picture plane first, it'll move the ground line then to be parallel to it, so it won't try and move the picture plane. If I'd selected the ground line first and then the picture plane, it would try to move the picture plane to be parallel to where the ground line was. I'm going to go on to the horizon line layer, create a line. Again, I'm moving away so it's not snapping onto anything, and I'm going to make the two of them parallel. So select the ground line, select the horizon line, and make them parallel. And you can adjust the edges and stuff like that then as you go along. Now I want to get the dimension between them, so we'll go Smart Dimension between the two, and as it says on the drawing, 60 mil. I want to hide that now, so right click on it and hide. Don't delete it, make sure you're hiding it. And I'm going to label them before I go any further. So I'll label that the horizon line. And I actually have to change the layer back to ground line then to label that so it's the same color. Okay, from that now we're going to start by finding our vanishing points. So a new layer, I'm going to call it vanishing point construction. I'm going to make that orange. I'm going to change it to a phantom line, and I am going to make it 0.35, or I might just change it to a dashed line so it's different than the other one up there. So what I have to do now is make sure I'm on that layer, draw a line from spectator up to picture plane in both directions. I have to make this edge now parallel with that line we're after drawing, and this edge here parallel with that line there we're after drawing. From there then we're going to drop these points down to the horizon line perpendicular to that picture plane. Okay, so I'm dropping that down, and that one automatically snapped on. If I drop this down, it might as well. So see, as I'm moving across, it snaps on and it shows that perpendicular symbol beside the cursor as well. So I know that they are right. I'm going to click a new layer. I'm going to put the actual vanishing points on this layer. So you'll see now in a second why I did them as a separate layer. Change the color 0.3, 0.5, and I'm just going to put a point where them lines hit the horizon line. So two red points now, and I'm going to label them VP1 and VP2. So we have our vanishing point 1 and vanishing point 2 as well. And you can move them in a bit closer. Now, this drawing will get very messy with lines. So what I can do is I'm going to hide that set of orange lines there that we used to find the vanishing points. So I can go see the layer, go across this eyeball symbol and just click it and it'll hide it. And that'll be handy later on when we're doing the layered solution when we want to show that to students. So I can hide whatever I want there. I might leave the cone of vision there for now and we'll go back and hide it later and I'll explain why. So we have our vanishing points, we have our plan view, we have our horizon line, ground line and our picture plane. So because this corner here is resting on the picture plane, we can take it straight down and we know it's resting on the ground line. So that's the first thing I want to do, and now starts the construction lines as such. And we're just going to call these layers con1, con2, and so on for construction. So construction 1 or con1, I'm going to make that pink, and I'm going to make that thickness of 0.35 millimeters. So start a sketch of a line straight down from this point here on the picture plane until it hits the ground line. And like that again, I want it perpendicular, which is okay there, it's already latched on. If it hasn't, what you can do is just select the ground line, select the line and make them perpendicular afterwards. So this is the point on the ground line where this corner rests. So I'm going to create a new construction line, or layer I should say. So you might think there's a lot of layers, but it'll be very helpful then when you want to break it down into small steps for the students. I'm going to make this one orange and make it 0.35 as well. So you'll see all the construction lines, I try to keep them 0.35. I'm connecting that point back to VP1 and connect it back to VP2 as well. So now I have these sides which represent these sides of the shape as well. Okay, another construction layer, so I'm going to call this con3. I'm going to use the same color, so it doesn't matter if you use the same color. The reason I have them in separate steps then is so I can hide one and show them happening in order. Change that to 0.35. And so if I connect any point, like this back point here, to the spectator, where it hits this picture plane then, I drop that down and it'll give me the position in my perspective. I already have two of these lines done, so from the cone of vision, this line here, going from the back point to the spectator, where that hits the picture plane, I'm going to bring that down, and where it hits it here, I'm going to bring it down, and that'll give me the length of them two sides as they appear foreshortened. So line from this intersection point straight down until I hit this line here. Okay, I'm not going to worry about getting it perfectly perpendicular just yet. Same on the side, bring that intersection point straight down until it hits that side there. Now what I'm going to do is click the picture plane, hold control and select the line and make sure that it is perpendicular. And I'm going to do the same on the other side then. What I have now is these two sides of the object. So that's the length of that side, that is the length of that side. I'm going to do another construction layer, and I'm going to do the same color again, just because all these construction lines are dealing with that base, so I'm keeping them the same color. On that layer now, I'm going to connect this point back to VP1 and this point here back to VP2. So now we have the shape there of the base of this object. What we need to find now is the sloped sides, and we need to use auxiliary vanishing points for that. Before we even get that far, what we're going to do is take these points here along the side, so where them lines touch that baseline, and the same on the back side, we're going to take them down onto the object. So I only really need to take them down on this front edge. I can get away without taking them down on the back side, and you'll see why shortly. So this is where it can get a bit messy because there'll be a lot of lines very close to each other. So I'm going to create a new construction layer, con 5, and I'm actually going to create two new construction layers, con 5 and con 6. I'm going to make sure they're the same color but different than that orange, so I'm going to make these ones something different now. I didn't have any blue construction lines, so I'll use blue for both of them. And I'm going to change the style of these to a dashed line. I'm going to change the thickness to 0.35 and just change that to whatever you want, whatever colors, thickness and style. I'm just going along with this because that's what I want to use. So I'm going to make sure I'm starting on construction 5 layer, and I'm connecting these points down to the spectator. Right, by doing that then it has given me points on the picture plane where the line intersects the picture plane. Okay, so I have these points now on the picture plane which I can take straight down onto that line. So I'm going to change on to construction layer 6 and start dropping lines straight down. So you might have to zoom in a bit and go for them points of intersection there, straight down onto this line here. So one for every one of them points there. And they might latch on and they might not. So if they, I'll go through it when it's done. So mine all latched on there and came down at the same angle. So I was lucky enough. If yours didn't, don't worry about it. Just click this edge, for example, and then click all them lines and make sure to click that they are parallel. And that should work. And you'll have points now on the base here that we took down from above. So on a new layer, I'm going to say edge points, and I'm going to just make that 0.5. I'll leave it black. Click OK. On that edge points layer, down here then I can select all these points that I'm after taking down. Right, the reason I wanted to do that is because these blue lines are quite messy. So go back into my layers and I'm going to hide those two construction lines, or construction layers. I'm also going to hide this cone of vision because I don't need it anymore and it's getting a bit messy. And if I hide it, I can show it later when I need it. Okay, so what we have now is we have the base, we have these lines, or points I should say, where the lines start. What we need to find out is these sloped edges. So we need to create auxiliary vanishing points using our 35-degree and our 20-degree angles that we mentioned earlier. So I'm going to start a new layer and I'm going to call it auxiliary or aux vanishing points construction. So aux VP con for auxiliary vanishing point construction, and I'm going to make that kind of a pink color. I'm going to make a normal line and I'm going to make it 0.35, and then I'm going to make another layer, just auxiliary vanishing points, and I'm going to actually put the points themselves on that and leave that black and 0.35 I'll say. I might actually just change that to red. So on the auxiliary vanishing point construction layer, what I'm going to do is actually I need that cone of vision again. So, or not the cone of vision, I need the lines that I got to get the vanishing points. So I'll just go through and show that. So the vanishing point construction, okay, that line there. So I need to show that again. And on the auxiliary vanishing point construction layer, I'm going to create a line from the spectator out in this direction. Try to make sure it doesn't snap onto anything or doesn't automatically make it horizontal like that. And then attach it to that point there where the line intersected the picture plane. I want to make this edge here, this line, and this line here perpendicular. And that'll make sense if you've done the drawing lab. Okay, you'll be going through this anyway. So you do a right angle there, and then we're going to dimension this with our angle. So between them two lines, I'm going to make that the angle of 20. So I'm going to do a 20-degree one first. If I zoom in a bit, I can move that slightly like that. What I can do now is click Smart Dimension, and I want to put a dimension on the end of this line here. So it's 26.76. I don't actually want to change that, but I just want to make it visible. So I'm going to actually show that dimension in a moment. Now I want to draw another line. So I'm going to find the other auxiliary vanishing point. So we have the angle at the front and the angle at the back to deal with. I'm going to do this one up the way. It doesn't actually matter if I did it up the way or down the way, because the dimension would be the same. I just don't want the two of them kind of sitting on top of each other. So do it up in this direction. Make sure it's not latched onto anything. Or try not to if I can. And connect it to that as well. I want to make this line and this line perpendicular again. And then I'll dimension this angle in here to be 35 degrees. So hopefully you can see that okay now. We were 35 degrees and our 20 degrees there. And it doesn't matter that it's cutting through there. It would in the drawing. Smart dimension again, and I just want to know what dimension this is here. Leave it driven, that's fine, and it's 51.49. We'll be using that now in a second. So we go down to the auxiliary vanishing points layer. Or actually we'll stay on the construction layer for the auxiliary vanishing points. I want to draw a line down the way from this line here. Okay, and I want to make it collinear with that line, because one of the vanishing points appears below the horizon line. So this angle here is technically going down away from the viewer. So it's going down below the horizon line. I want to make that line there and that line there collinear. And then what I'll do is I'm going to dimension this line here, the same dimension as this, so 26.76. Because that gives me the height I needed for my vanishing point. Okay, so you can leave that shown, and then when you're going back over it, it'll show clearly how you got that dimension. I want to do another one up the way, but I want a point. So I'm going to go onto the auxiliary vanishing points layer, create a point, so one point there, and one point up on this line somewhere. I'm going to smart dimension between that point and the horizon line, and I'm going to make it this 51.49. So 51.49, and that's got from creating this construction up here. So now we have VP1, VP2 of the auxiliary vanishing points. So I can label them. I'm going to label this one AUX VP1, so auxiliary vanishing point 1, and this one up here is auxiliary vanishing point 2. So what I'm going to do with these now, so I might just try and tidy this up a bit first. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just try to keep it as neat as you can. What I might do is hide this dimension and hide this angle up here. So as long as I can, not that one, so I'll just undo that. I want to hide this 35-degree one. So as long as I show one of them going through the entire process, so the 20 degrees, the dimension, and the dimension here, it should be clear enough then. So what we can do is we can go and create a new construction layer. So con 7 this time. I'm going to make this a blue, maybe. I'm going to move this till I see what colors I already used. So it's going to be down here, so I might use a blue because I didn't use blue construction lines down there yet. Or not at the moment anyway. So 0.35 and click OK. What I can do now is start finishing off this drawing. So connecting a line from the corner up to our auxiliary vanishing point, down to our other corner. I can connect all them points now that we found earlier up to the auxiliary vanishing point as well. So that'll give us these lines here going up that sloped edge. Now I might do another construction layer for the other side just so we can hide them separately. I'll use the same color and the same thickness. And on that layer now, I'm going to go from our vanishing point 1 through that bottom corner and up until it hits this line here. So from the bottom corner up to the line, and make sure that they are collinear. So it already has that relation added in. Okay, what I can do then is connect that point there over to vanishing point 1, and that gives me the top edge there to work from. Another construction layer, and I know there's a lot, but it's just handier to keep them separate. What I can do now is if I zoom in, connect these top points back to vanishing point 1. Okay, so now I have these back lines, the front lines, and all the base edges that I need. Final thing to do, one new layer, I'm going to say this is finished, or you can call it solution. I'm going to leave it black, I'm going to make it 0.5, so fairly thick line. And then I just go over what I've done so far to show the finished edges. Okay, there's no need to show hidden detail in a perspective question usually, unless it asks for it specifically in the question. So that one's slightly wrong, I'll just delete that. So I can zoom in just to make sure I'm getting all the correct lines. And just trace around all them edges. It should be fairly clear now what this final item looks like, or final shape looks like. Okay, so I'm actually missing one line there. So I'll just go back to the final construction layer and add that in. So from this top point down. And then I can go back to my finished layer and add in that final line there. Just try to zoom in and get. So you can see that line of mine is slightly off. So what I can do is it's on the wrong intersection. So move this point so that it's on this orange line as well. And that should just fix that then. This point is slightly off too. So if I click the line, get the endpoint. So I just want the endpoint on its own. So if I click escape, click the endpoint, hold control and click the line. And I want to make them coincident so it'll move over slightly. Okay, so the final drawing should look something like that. It's a bit messy looking as it is. Go through the layers then. What I want you to do is hide the layers. So work back from the very end and hide all the layers until there's just the actual drawing there. So we start off with just this drawing and I have a layer there not hidden, must be. Okay, I don't know why that's gone. Okay, so we just have the question. So click Save As, go into your Save As type, change that to JPEG, go into Options, make sure it clicked on Print Capture, change the DPI to something like 800, click OK, and then whatever folder you're using, put it in there. Now what I want you to do is number them, so that's 1, so it's in that step 1, and I'll save that, give it a second to export. And then I want you to show each layer step by step. So if I show the next one is the cone of vision, click OK, save as, change that to JPEG. The settings should be the same now, so you don't need to change them. But I'm going to call this 2. So keep going through and save all them images step by step. So I'll show the next one, the picture plane. Click OK, save as, JPEG, and call that 3. Now, if there is certain things you think can be shown in one step rather than layer by layer, that's fine, but just don't show too much at once. So it should be to the standard that you could show this to second level students and that it'd be very simple for them to follow along. For example, there the ground line, we could show that with the horizon line because they're fairly simple, they're just two parallel lines. So I can save that now and just keep going through that until the drawing is complete. You can also hide layers along the way. So when you get to say step 8 or 9 or whatever it might be, and you no longer need the cone of vision, for example, you can hide that to make the drawing a bit clearer. So the final solution then should be clear step by step, but not too many lines that it confuses the student. And I'll show an example now of that in a second. Okay, so when you have all the JPEGs exported from the SOLIDWORKS drawing, what I want you to do then is create a step-by-step PowerPoint of the solution. So when you start the PowerPoint, make sure you go over to the Design tab and change the slide size to A3. If you don't, it'll leave a big border around your sheets. So it doesn't matter what you pick there once it's empty. So I'm going to change the layout of that. So I just right-clicked on there and change the layout to blank. And I'm going to copy and paste that slide. So I clicked over there on the left, copy and paste that a pile of times because I want a load of blank ones. I'll go to the first one now, go to Insert, Pictures, and you should be fit to look through whatever folder you save them to. And now, because they're numbered, it should be very simple to take them in step by step. Now, I'm not going to do it for every one of them, but just make sure you are filling them out to the page. So drag them until they fill the page and have them centered properly as well. So I'll just quickly insert them and just make sure that you are filling them up on your page. So you should be fit to see now from the images you're taking in the different line weights and so on. The ones you made thinner, the ones you made thicker. Okay, so I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. You should be fit to do that. So just make sure that if you flick down through them, there is a step-by-step solution of how that question was done until the very end. Okay, and then your final one should look something like this. I'll just get my final one. So, we can hide most of the construction lines at that point and just show the finished item. What I want you to do with that though, so just insert text boxes. So go insert and find text box, draw a text box, and just put in, a couple of lines of what's happening in each step. So the first one might just say, um, you know, to the left can be seen, or to the left is the plan view of object A, for example, you might call it. So that's simple enough for the first one. But as you go on, you should be describing. In this step, we drew the cone of vision, for example, by connecting the extreme points in plan to the spectator. We bisected that angle of the cone of vision, and the perpendicular line to that bisector give us the picture plane. You can just explain step by step what's actually going on, that if you give this to a student to study, so you might be giving grounds to a student, for example, they could flick through this and easily read what's going on step by step. In terms of submitting it, this will be in the portfolio as well. I don't expect you to have 20 pages printed or whatever. So if you go to print, we're going to use print to PDF as well, as we do with SolidWorks. Just change it so it is something like 6 slides, for example, per page. And it'll just save pages for yourself. Change that to landscape and just have it the same as your the rest of the portfolio. Okay, so just do it as if you're going to print it like that, and then you can print to PDF and save it and merge it with the PDF for your next submission as well.